In New York, a 74-year-old woman plunged her car into the Washington Square Park, killing 5 people. At the Chicago O'Hare Airport, an 87-year-old woman plowed into a group of grade school children, killing 1 and injuring the other 76. In Los Angeles, a 100-year-old man backed his car into 11 people, with 9 of those being school children. These are just a few examples of why elderly drivers should be tested yearly, 5 years, etc., after a certain age to ensure that they are safe to be on the roads. A study by Nicholas Ray in 2019 in his journal article titled The Pros and Cons of Older Drivers, he found that every 1.5 minutes, 88 auto accidents will happen, and 18 of them will be directly related to the elderly community. Elderly drivers account for nearly 19% of all automotive accidents in the United States. This is in the United States alone. This isn't including the statistics of other countries. On top of that, 1 motor vehicle death occurs every 15 minutes. With that being said, what's the appropriate age for elderly drivers to continue to stay on the roads? Is it 60, 65, 70? And the question is, when should they be tested in order to stay on the roads? In Tennessee, every 8 years is when we are required to get our license updated. In most states, it's 4. However, the longest state is Arizona, with a 12-year long period until renewal. Some of the pros of making elderly drivers renew their licenses is going to be lowering the amount of automobile accidents caused by elderly drivers. According to a study by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety in 2012, on a per mile basis, the death rate of 85 drivers and older nearly triples that of the driver aged 16 and 17, and it is nearly 20 times that of the driver aged 50 to 59. Another pro would be it would help to ensure that drivers are capable of driving and that the roads are safe and effective for all drivers. So if we make sure that the older community is able to drive efficiently, then we are ensuring the safety of other drivers on the road. And another pro would be it would help the families of the elderly drivers feel safe, knowing that their family members are not in the car if they are not able to drive safely and effectively. There are certain issues that it can impair the ability of an elderly driver, which could be vision impairments, hearing impairments, cognitive impairments, and physical impairments. Most tests for relicensing is going to test the vision, but that does not account for the hearing loss and compromised cognitive abilities. So if we do retest for the driver's license, we need to make sure that we are doing cognitive and hearing as well, because those are major areas that we use when driving. And in other countries such as Italy, older people at the age of 80 need to pass a license exam every year to have their license confirmed. They need to pass the cognitive function, visual, and hearing, as well as cardiovascular fitness. And another aspect that can affect the driving of elderly people would be the medications. Medicines can also cause deterioration of your senses, which when taken for an extended period of time, which when you are older, you tend to be on medicines for a longer period of time as opposed to the younger generation. A journal article about the pros and cons of retesting elderly drivers by Esther Kane in 2018 states that we do not require any proof of adequate vision in the United States for our retesting. And those states that do not require the adequate vision are Alaska, Connecticut, Kentucky, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and of course, Tennessee. Marriott Whitman of 2021 wrote an article called When to Take the Keys from Elderly Drivers, and she explains the struggles of watching your parents age and how frustrating it can be for them as well to start losing senses when you get older, and by having conversations with them to make it more acceptable and to help them understand why they do not need to be driving. And knowing that your loved one is off the road and they're safe is also helpful for the family to know and not worry about them. Also, the New York Times stated in 1992, so almost 20 years ago, that several states have introduced a graded license, which is where drivers over 55 are road tested every 4 years and those over 75 every 2 years. An in-between test can be given if the doctors or family members feels like they are not reaching the adequate health conditions. And then some conditions where you have to inform the DMV are lapse of consciousness, Alzheimer's, cataracts, dementia, and diabetes. Some of the cons that go along with retesting elderly drivers, the number one is going to be how the elderly community feels singled out and discriminated and targeted against. They feel as if it is unfair that they are having to get relicensed every year, every 5 years, because they've been doing it for so long. They feel as if they know more than the younger generations. And Amber Knopf wrote an article in 2019 named "Why Restricting Older Drivers is Pure and Simple Ageism," which goes into detail about how it's unfair to test drivers who have been driving for a lot longer than we have. And Anne, who wrote the article, is 70 years old, and she states it's unfair to make her or any other driver study an outdated manual, which is 107 pages. And she says that the manual is not updated to our current cars, how we have camera reverse systems, some have automatic parallel parking, and some can drive themselves. So she thinks the book is very outdated and there's no use in them having to study this book when it doesn't apply to our cars today. And she believes that it's unfair to make them take these tests if we're not making the younger ones take them as well. Sandy Rosenblum of 2003 wrote a study over older drivers. Should we test them off the road? Most communities are far from meeting the transportation needs that they need, such as rural areas, such as where I'm from. In Murfreesboro, I think there are many ways to get around, but if you live out in the country or far away, there's no way for you to travel if you can't drive somewhere. So if we are going to integrate the relicensing for the older generation, we need to make sure it's readily available for them to access from point A to point B if they do not have a family to take them where they need to be and things like that. Also, in 2016, Jenny Burgel wrote an article about should older drivers face special restrictions. And she stated that without a car, they can feel isolated and depressed, and their physical and mental health can deteriorate, which is very true. If you go into nursing homes, you see that when they are isolated and alone, they are more likely to feel depressed and get upset and acquire depression. So that is another thing, that's another con that we need to consider when we are relicensing for the elderly community. However, the main con when it comes to relicensing the elderly community is going to be when they're involved in car crashes. The elderly community is most likely the one who is going to get hurt, and they are going to be killed and injured very badly compared to younger people, how we can recover quicker, and it's harder for the elderly community to recover. So the biggest con is going to be their health and their safety, and we need to consider that when we are talking about relicensing the elderly community and what age we need to do that and how often. So, like I said, to restate, we are going to have those pros, which of course are going to be keeping everyone safe on the roads. We're going to be helping the families out, making sure their loved ones are safe. But of course, the cons are going to be public transportation. We need to make that readily available for them. And another con is going to be, of course, how the elderly are affected by the car crashes and how they are the one who get the most hurt. So we need to consider all of these things when we are trying to figure out whether or not we need to relicense and what is the age that which we need to start doing so. Thank you.